everybody. You know, I just realized something, that if if Lake Arrowhead is only 9 months away, you could get pregnant if you want it real fast. Just a thought, just a possibility. So it's great to be here with all of you, contemplating these higher, loftier ideas, as we do. And thank you, Reverend Louisa, for your interpretation of the turtle. It has nothing to do whatsoever with my story. But thanks for giving it a go. Okay, so this is a story asking the turtle came about as a result of Gloria Steinem. And when she was studying geology at one time in college, she took a field trip with her geology class. And they went deep into the woods. And as they were all wandering around doing whatever the assignment was at that moment, she discovered a massive snapping turtle that was struggling. It had come up from the river. It had climbed and ascended an embankment, and now it was walking slowly and laboriously and was parked at the side of the road. And she thought to herself, well, I've got to take care of this. You know, cars come by, bikes go by. And so she picked up this heavy turtle, and she lovingly took it, put it back in the river, and left it in the water. And her professor, as she turned around to leave, was right behind her. He said, what are you doing? And she said very proudly, very much feeling she had accomplished a good deed, she said, well, I was afraid that this turtle would be killed, and so I wanted to help it. I placed it back in the river. And he very, very angrily said, you did not help that turtle. It probably took her about a month to walk up to this point in the side of the road so that she could find a muddy place to safely lay her eggs. The moral. I don't know, but isn't that great? No, lots of morals. So the bottom line to that is, mind your own business, will you? And if somebody needs your help, they'll ask. No, there are so many lessons that come from that. And facetiously, yes, definitely, we're told that there's one business that we're about expressing, and that is the divine nature, as everything you've heard and experienced. And this morning's new healing meditation service is such a beautiful experience in deepening the consciousness of that I am, that if you haven't attended it up until this point, please do. Treat yourself to that deeper communion with the holiness of our being. And so if indeed, with the best of intentions, we go about our lives assisting and facilitating, sometimes it borders on the point of rescuing, ultimately, as we discover spiritual principles, that divine principle that we refer to, but it's the principle of our own being. It's that discovery of and awakening to this something that is higher and mightier, smarter and stronger, freer and more creative, loving, than this personality of ours, which we've adapted in many ways that are survival techniques, but we're beyond that now. And if the world doesn't need a higher and more advanced spiritual thinking at this particular time, I don't know when it ever will. Everyone claims that the civilization and the time and place in which they lived was far deeper and broader and wider in problems and challenges. But really, if you trace back to history, everyone is simply the reflection of that point in evolution. And so what we're experiencing now is really a call to not only evolve ourselves and elevate our own consciousness, but to really do it on behalf of the universe, to know there is something greater that has to happen if indeed there is to be a thriving and a complete overturning of the things that obviously aren't working right now. I had a great experience in minding my own business and yet seeing how my business has dovetailed with other people's business. If you haven't noticed it, on the website for the Science of Mind archives, anybody ever go to Science of Mind archives and library? It's an amazing resource. And of course, the motive for creating this aspect of Census for Spiritual Living has been to bring all of the knowledge and wisdom of Ernest Holmes and associated teachers and ministers and philosophers from within the broader Science of Mind metaphysical movement, as well as the specifics of religious science. In any case, they must have said, well, you never know how long this broad's going to be around. We should really video her and get her on the archives. And so they're setting about doing that for all of the ministers who really have stories to tell. And so two very good friends of mine happened to be heading up that committee, and they came to interview me on Thursday night. And it's a very odd thing when my tendency is to be more spontaneous. They gave me a whole list of questions, which I politely looked at and then set aside, because I believe in mind in the moment. Would you repeat that after me? I believe in mind in the moment. Wait, let's say it all together. I believe in mind in the moment. Yeah, I mean, it's great. What you did yesterday, what I did yesterday when I helped that turtle off the side of the road, that was the consciousness that existed at that moment. But we're not here to rest on our laurels. The whole intention of evolving in favor of and as a benefit to this entire universe is to exceed the boundaries of our own limitations. And knowing myself, we still all have them. I hate to be the one to offer this disillusioning thought, but we still operate out of a lot of limitations from human thought, our own and race mind. So anyway, they came and we set up the place, and they came with their little video setups and tripods. It was all very impressive. And then they started firing these questions, and I found that as I was relating the places I've been, and starting, of course, in my first teacher, Dr. Tom Johnson. Anybody remember the man who raised his hand? Yes, exactly. And so going up to Canada as my first ministry in 1985. But as I would continue to be answering the questions, I realized that the sequencing of the time, it all seemed to come together in one compressed, unfolding saga. So that I was telling the story of how I started ministry before I said, by the way, I was divorced. This was all done when I discovered I was single and had the opportunity to forge a different lifestyle for myself. So your life and my life is very much like this unfolding scenario that goes on in universal mind. It doesn't track the day, the month, the year. We do that. We follow a calendar of special occasions just for our own diversion and to support us in remembering special occasions. But as far as the universe is concerned, it continues to maintain, sustain, and ever expand its own nature. And that's why sometimes we'll hear teachers say, God wants us to have more. Well, I mean, it's not like somebody's floating around encouraging us. It's that immanence as well as the transcendence of this infinite intelligence, the originating mind of life itself, that is permeating our own thought, our own awareness, to the degree we welcome that, we acquiesce to that, we consent to that, and we develop the spiritual practices that facilitate more of this availability for the divine. Because God, as the self that we all are, does want more of itself, not as stuff, not as bigger cars and greater houses and more trinkets. That's all well and good. But that aspect of universal intelligence, moved by the presence of love, really wants us to experience more being, more self-expression, more creativity, more good feelings, so that we're not leaving ourselves out on the ledge of the worldly terrors that face all of us. If we were to focus our attention completely on the outer, I think we'd all just go home, lock ourselves in a closet, and say, the heck with it. This is going nowhere but down. The purpose of a spiritual journey, as far as I'm concerned, is to develop within ourselves this advanced thinking that originates from a spiritual vantage point. There's a great book, and it's by Guy Hendricks, and it's called The Big Leap. And the subtitle is Healing All of Those Hidden Fears That Keep Us from Taking the Big Leap. So the premise of this book really was stimulated by a question a very dear friend of mine asked me. And she said to me, what about not only experiencing the good life and appreciating what you have in your marriage, in your creative expression of life, in the deeper ways of peace that you're experiencing, but what do we do so that we don't allow that to become really just a mediocrity and a boredom and a repetitive cycle? How do we take that which is good and create that leap, really, into what is even better? I think it was Bach, either Richard or Marcus, who said, don't let the good become the enemy of the greater. In any case, Hendricks wrote this book called The Big Leap, and he describes that situation and condition of everything being good. Life is really moving along, regardless of what's going on in the bigger picture. I'm still maintaining my balance, my interior equilibrium. I'm still satisfied and fulfilled. And then comes, those two words, yeah, but. And out of that, he suggests that we take the leap from excellence to the leap into the zone of genius. Now, how many times have we affirmed, I express the divine genius of God as me? Let's say that together. I express the divine genius of God as me. For the truth is, there is that within you, within me, all around us, through us, and as an availability to tap into, beyond and over that intellect, that fine use of all the information and all the knowledge that we've accumulated, that we've absorbed, that we've listened to and read and heard. And yet beyond that human level of using thought, there is something so much more spacious, so much more grandiose, something that I can only describe and you can only describe as that bigger mind, that bigger think tank of the universe, universal intelligence. And it targets everything. When you're really tuned into the subtler aspects of it, there really is an appreciation for, rather than butting into someone else's business, the lesson of really asking the turtle is about, please trust that this universal intelligence in me, through me, around me, and as you, as all, as everything, really does know what it's doing. And although we're here to cooperate with the principle by giving the best and the highest of ourselves, by cooperating with the law of reciprocal action, by giving and receiving, nothing is ever a one-way street. We're always in relationship. We're in relationship to ourselves, to our money, to the people in our world, to the people we pass in cars. Sometimes it's just a rich moment where you see the connecting dots, and something that was going a separate way suddenly becomes cohesive and congruent. It makes sense. It's the only way I can describe it was this week. I was driving on the freeway, and there was, surprise, surprise, a stop of all traffic. We just came to a halt. And usually, if I look around, I see, people are either grabbing that moment to text, or they're on their phones, or they're bored, or they're annoyed, or they're angry. But in this moment, as I just silently sat there and observed, at that same instantaneous moment, the car next to me, he turned. And for 1 minute, these two separate mechanical, huge devices being driven by two different objective representations of God, suddenly their eyes met. And for one moment, we both did the same thing, unrehearsed. We both shrugged our shoulders and smiled. You know, just like, what you gonna do? Maybe a good moment to say, God is, I am. But just that moment of connection is the reflection of the oneness of all life, that it truly is something that exceeds our human parameters. So if indeed I take the lesson of always asking the turtle, I'll become more attuned to asking how I can serve, how I can give more of my attention and intention to this one universal mind. How is it that I can fulfill? You've all done the visioning process, right? And so those questions, don't let them become locked into the zone of excellence without taking the leap into the zone of genius. Because to ask beyond what my human intellect thinks would be really good and better for me, what is the divine vision? What's God's idea of itself as me? That's tapping into the divine genius, the creative intelligence that's up here when I've been scrambling down here. And if I truly do ask, what is it that best serves to fulfill God's idea of itself as me? You know, we may get answers we may not like. Not to say you're going to get rid of the husband or the mate or the partner. Not to say that, not suggesting it. But just taking a leap from what becomes perhaps the mediocrity of the normal and the ordinary, and taking that to the higher level of the extraordinary, is simply cultivating and developing your own spiritual practices so that you're always fine-tuning, you're always pruning, you're always just weaving your way through and letting go, just as Reverend Kathy was describing, letting go of the things we're carrying that we have no business carrying any more than Gloria had any real business, real God business, carrying that turtle. The turtle knew exactly what it was doing and had struggled to get to where it was, which raises another question. Who are we to deprive anyone else of their experience in fulfilling a greater idea? Much less is that something we just use as a distraction to keep us from discovering a greater idea, a greater perception of ourselves. There's just so many ways in which the levels of our own awareness go unobserved and unnoticed unless every day, starting every day, we do not let an opportunity for solitude, for silence, for communion and connection to let go. That's why applying the principle by practicing the spiritual tools and techniques are so all important. And somehow out of this vast universal void pops the unexpected. When again I have taken the leap from excellence to genius and allowed for something that knows what it's doing beyond my own concept to do it through and by means of me so that I experience God's presence. Many of you may know or may not that my older brother was killed in World War II. And my family, my mom and dad at that time, chose to leave his body overseas rather than my mom, who was ill at the time, re-experiencing the pain in such a dramatic way by bringing his body home. So 60 years went by, and I was the kid sister. But I discovered that through this path, even though I knew that the gravesite in Draguignan, France, was not a place that contained anything other than the remnants of a soul that had already moved on. The body forms of bones were just there. But I had this creative urge to really go and visit him because nobody had been there. So I was feeling like that was important. And it was the 60th anniversary of D-Day. So through many connecting links that proved the dots were all there, and my desire was what held the key to bringing them all into a perfect divine harmony that would get me to where I wanted to be, to fulfill a greater expression of God. So I do my visit in southern France, beautiful, the Rhone, American Rhone Military Cemetery. That's it. Fast forward 10 years, this week. An email comes to me forwarded from my former Westlake Village Center for Spiritual Living. And it says, "Hello, would you please see that Dr. Sue gets this message? I was just at the American Rome Cemetery and just visited her brother's grave and did the Kaddish." The man is obviously Jewish. I never did that, so God, that's another blessing of connecting the dots and marking the chapter close. And I'm racking my brain after I dissolved into tears. I said, "Who is he? I don't know who this man is. How did he, what, mind?" I asked the turtle of intelligence, would there be a possibility? I was a little bit begging and beseeching that maybe you could clarify this for me. So first and foremost, mine said, "Hello, answer his email now that you have his address." See, we get our answers instantaneously. So I write, "Evan, who are you? Are we related? How did you know? Da-da-da-da-da-da." Talk among yourselves. This is... He writes back and he says, "Do you remember in 2004, which was the year that I went, there was an article that was done on you in the Ventura County Star, and they carried that through all the other papers. It was syndicated, and it said, 'Kid sister goes to visit brother's grave, anniversary of D-Day.'" He said, "I saw that article. It captured my attention. I happen to be originally from South Africa, been living in the UK for the past 3 years with my 3 kids, my wife, and we live in England, but we travel to that region of France very often, and I became curious. And so this year when we went on holidays, you notice in Europe they don't go on vacation, they go on holidays. And they decided to go visit the grave, and they had all the information. And then that article, of course, tuned him into the center in Westlake, which was how he found me. So don't you dare tell me or let anyone tell you that that intelligence, that propelling power and presence of love doesn't desire greater being, greater expression, greater good feelings, greater realization that as vast, as spacious as life is, there is a spot, a placement for each and every one of us. And it's never really anything other than seeing a bigger picture than what we presently are looking at. So in the brief moments, there's so much more to talk to you about. Because life is just an amazement, and each day it becomes better. The few moments that I have left, let's go into treatment. I'm speaking in the I Am, which is the nature of the divine. It's God naming itself uniquely as you and as me. And right here and right now, I declare unequivocally, with faith, with conviction, with trust, with joy, with appreciation, gratitude, and acceptance, that there really is only one mind, one life, one heart, one propelling creative urge. It is the ultimate goodness of life, whether I call it Buddha, nature, Atman, Brahma, God, infinite intelligence, radiant isness, I amness, everythingness. It is that which desires fuller expression through my own awakened thought, my more advanced thinking, so that before butting in to what really is none of my business in life, I fully and willingly experience my own difficulties, my own challenges, my own ways of moving upward, onward, and forward into fuller awareness, expression, and manifestation of that which God is, I am. And as I do this for myself, I freely and willingly grant everyone else in my world that same liberating experience of rising and shining, so that each and every one of us individually and collectively really contributes to the evolution of this entire universe by giving the gifts of our own faith, our own unique qualities of divine being, and by contributing all of that uniquely and magically, it would appear, to that which contributes to a world that works for everyone. So it's a new moment. It's a new day. I let go of what goes. I welcome what comes. For I know I am always safeguarded, guided, protected, impelled, inspired, and governed by the mighty, one and only true God, the God that is transcendent and immanent. I accept this. Mind knows precisely and elegantly what to do with it on my behalf and for the behalf of this universe. And now I simply let it be so, as together in acceptance and remembrance we declare God is, I am, and so it is. Together, God is, I am, and so it is.